So yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Brandon Geeting. I am a photographer, born and raised in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, but now located in New York City. And yeah, I moved to New York in 2007 to go to SVA, School of Visual Arts, to study photography. And yeah, I don't know, graduated and was just kind of here ever since. I have a personal practice, but I also shoot commercially for money. And yeah, up until now was, pre NFTs was kind of working on a new project every 2 or 3 years, putting out a book for that project, having a show, this kind of pipeline. And I'm excited about the possibility of, still putting out books and still having IRL shows, but also this new platform is super exciting in many ways, and the work is able to be shared with so many more people than a 500 pressed 500 copies of a book pressed, or a gallery at a gallery show in New York that not everyone has access to. But anyway, I have a PDF I made that sort of starts from work I made right after graduating SVA in the early 2010s, and kind of what got me on this track of creating work that is sort of similar to Amusement Park, and eventually how I made Amusement Park, which is what I'm dropping with Fellowship tomorrow. And I'm really excited about. So anyway, I will share my screen if that is cool with you guys.
Yeah, please do. I'm gonna change something here.
Cool. Okay, somehow it's telling me, I just updated my computer and I re-downloaded Zoom, and it's saying that it won't let me share the contents until I quit and reopen, because I'm like updating the preference. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be back in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Hey, Message, I see you there. Thanks everyone for coming too.
Okay, cool. There we go. Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So yeah, when I graduated college, I was a bit like, what do I do now? And had sort of spent those 4 years primarily walking around with like a 35mm camera, and kind of finding things on the street that were, out of place or strange, or like strange arrangements of things that then led me to think maybe I'm actually interested in still life. And a teacher had told me that as well. Maybe you should start making things, because your found photos are kind of only as exciting as your life is, which is true. So I began then, when I graduated, sort of taking that advice to heart. And I was like, juggling a few part-time jobs, but also had this kind of pent-up creative energy, and was like, this guy, Peter Sutherland, an artist, a friend of mine that I had been interning for, gave me his old DSLR, because he was like, you shouldn't be paying for film again. You're broke, all this stuff. Why don't you just take this and make some photos? It'll be easy to kind of churn out work that way. And so I'd like come home. I worked at a juice bar for a while. I'd like come home late at night and be like, what can I make today? Like, what is around the house that could perhaps produce something interesting? Or what could be viewed in a new light, through the lens of a camera that has potential somehow, in a still life. And I would do things like this. I would take a photo of like a lighter with a diamond on it and on a piece of aluminum foil, in the sunlight, or the last clove of garlic um, with a twist tie and a leaf attached to it on some insulation material, and just kind of really sorry um, scratch my head and look around and try to view my apartment as raw material for art. And Tumblr was popular at the time. It was kind of pre-Instagram. Uh, and I would post this stuff, and it started to garner some attention, and people seemed to like it. And now that I had an audience for it, I was like, okay, this is even more exciting, um, to try and make things every day, or at least a few times a week, and post them and get feedback and post more. Um, so I was kind of compiling like a huge archive of these random assemblages, and actually maybe not so random, because the things I chose were quite specific. And also I was getting into kind of using Photoshop in funny ways. I was influenced by people like Lucas Blaylock and Sam Falls at the time, that were kind of like using Photoshop wrong. um, this image on the right of a cucumber is like, there's like heavy post-production on it. I don't do too much stuff like that these days, but it was fun at the time, and it was kind of joining a conversation that was happening in contemporary photography. Um, but yeah, it was interesting to like make an image of pre-sliced and plastic wrapped cucumber coming out of a folder I got at the dollar store, instead of like using Photoshop to like take a zit off of somebody's face or something. So I was just kind of having fun. Or these pigeons, I colored them um, in post, because I thought, I'd never seen something like that before, and why not try it? Um, the image on the left is maybe what I was most known for in like the early 2010s. It was like very widely shared on Tumblr, and the name of it is Infinite Power. It's a bunch of power strips plugged into one another. And yeah, my friends and I sort of, I don't want to like fully take credit for anything, but me and maybe five friends were taking a lot of photos on kind of very smooth plain colored backdrops with hard shadows. And anyone that lives in a city and rides the subway or looks at billboards can see that that stuff has really made its way into advertising in like the last 5 to 10 years in a big way. And it's funny to think that it sort of started on Tumblr. Not saying that still life photographers decades ago weren't doing this, but this was like very kind of like digital looking and contemporary, and let's throw a piece of fruit on it, or pineapple, and all these kinds of things, pink pastel background. um so yeah, it's funny to think that maybe this image of power strips was like on some startup's billboard for a new seltzer brand or something. um but anyway, so I eventually got a studio, and in that studio I would then start to buy materials to make photos with, that were similar to the household photos, um, and try to get a bit more complex with it, playing with layering and thinking about the camera as kind of like a tool to flatten whatever's in front of it. So thinking about the sensor, or the negative, if you will, as a canvas, and trying to just fill the frame in interesting ways, and play with layering, and making work that I think, if you squint your eyes, it still works, because it is about kind of color and form and abstraction in these things. um, but using a lot of things that are like utilitarian or from the dollar store, and just kind of challenging myself with new assignments all the time to see what I could come up with. Eventually, all of these images were compiled in a book called Infinite Power. It was my first book. It was released in 2015, and by Powwow Publications, who's now defunct. But yeah, that was exciting. And I did the whole thing, signing at Dashwood Books in New York. There was no exhibition for it. I was kind of young, didn't have gallery representation, wasn't really talking to anyone about that, but the book did pretty well, and I was excited about it, and excited that it kind of opened doors for me to continue making books. And yeah, just kind of like it was sort of that moment where I was like, okay, I'm really doing this. Like, I have something published out in the world. It's kind of like my first thing I'm able to physically leave behind as an artist. Here's a cover of it. It came in like a screen printed plastic bag, which I thought was funny because it's very like highbrow meets lowbrow, like paying someone to screen print all of these plastic bags that, you know, should or might have been thrown away otherwise. Um, and yeah, Christopher Schreck wrote the intro for it. He's like a art writer and critic and was an editor at Kaleidoscope magazine. I think maybe he still is. And we had a still life Twitter spaces with him the other day, and it was really interesting. Now on to Amusement Park. Amusement Park sort of started in the aftermath of Infinite Power, and I was thinking about maybe instead of just a collection of odds and ends, this time it would be thematic in a way, and it would have like not necessarily a thesis, but something to riff off of, a phrase to riff off of, or a kind of idea to keep in my mind while I was making this imagery, instead of just viewing photography as like an exercise to see what I could come up with, like assemblage wise. And I started to sort of shy away a bit from the seamless backgrounds and this type of thing, and in favor of some found imagery that already existed in a lot of these, whether they came from calendars or stock images that I would print out, or in the case of this image on the right, the background was actually a gift box, like from a local dollar store. But I was interested in this kind of embracing this kind of confusion in a way, where it was like, you know, to figure out the image would require multiple views instead of the previous work, which I think you could kind of see all the elements and be like, okay, I know how he did that. The one with the toothpaste is pretty easy to figure out, but I do like this idea of like, at first glance, you're like, what am I looking at again? And I wasn't really worried about playing with this idea of authorship and free use images or found things or what's mine and what isn't, because as far as I was concerned, you know, once my hand is in it and once it's kind of edited and messed with a bit, then it becomes a unique image of my own. So I was making these images and wondering kind of what the theme would be here, where it would go. And a friend of mine, I showed the work to a lot of people. These were some of the early pictures from it before I knew the name. And a friend of mine was like, dude, your work reminds me of an amusement park. It's just like very colorful and like there's a lot going on. It's like kind of chaotic. All of these things, there are a lot of elements competing for attention. And I was like, that's it. That's somehow like, I just sort of took that and ran with it because it made a lot of sense. And also as a kid, I loved amusement parks, this kind of thing where it's like extremely fun, but as an adult, you're sort of like, get me out of here. You kind of see behind the scenes a bit, and it's loud and it's messy and it's colorful, but it's kind of all these things at once. And there are things competing for your attention, and there are kinds of layers everywhere. And so I was like, well, how about I visit a local amusement park and see what's up and bring a camera, and maybe some images from that can also make its way into this project. And the cover of the book ended up being this image on the right. There's no Photoshop involved. This was like an ad for a new roller coaster that they had there, like coming soon, but there was a bunch of trees behind it. So you can kind of see the trees through this mesh. And then in front of that was a blue chain link like barrier. And, you know, I hit it with the on camera flash. So that thing is like kind of like out of focus and blown out, but it's so compressed that it's hard to figure out. And it looks very kind of like digitally rendered in a way. And I was excited about that. I was like, okay, so I can still kind of go out in the wild and find things that look like my work, kind of combining this thing that I had eventually been advised against and then I had moved away from. It was nice to kind of bring outside pictures back in and almost to embrace this confusion where it's like, does the audience think I made this in my studio? What was made in studio? What was found? This image on the left here is a collage actually. The background is part of a car calendar that I bought and used for many images in this book called Auto Collage 1, Auto Collage 2, and so forth. And the image on top of the little boy with the purple fence is a photo I took at this amusement park on Long Island. And yeah, I thought it would be also cool to just kind of like make small prints of the amusement park photos and collage them with other things throughout the book, um, and see what kind of layering upon layering could do to them. When I got back, I was thinking about how else I could fill the book and what sort of mini series maybe I could make in my studio that would supplement some of the amusement park imagery and the existing still lifes I had. And one of the ideas I came up with was this series of balloon animals. And so these kind of run throughout the book, like maybe every 10 pages, you'll see one of these. And I was working on this commercial job, and they wanted portraits with printed imagery as the background. So I found all of these stock images on Getty and we printed them big. And I did the job and they were like, do you want to take these? And I was like, hell yeah, because I can definitely find some other use for them in my work. And I held on to them for a while. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And then I had this balloon animal idea and I was like, oh, those would be perfect. We'll kind of add to this strange surreal element. You don't know if you're outside or it's fake or what's going on, or digitally, you know, photoshopped or whatever. But I made these in my studio and I found I can't make balloon animals, or at least I've never learned, but I found a woman on Craigslist that does so, and I put out an ad and she came through, and I could at the time only, you know, I was like, I can have you here for about an hour, because her rate was quite pricey, and we just kind of like quickly ran through the motions. I was like, what can you make? And she was like, a sword, a monkey, airplanes, a seahorse. And I was like, okay, great, give them to me, give them all to me. And then she would finish one and I would take it over to the tabletop and throw up like a printed backdrop and be like, does this work? Do the colors match? No, like, let's check this one, and just kind of fire away. And this is what I came up with. But it was cool. And I think that kind of chaotic energy is sort of in my work as a whole. It's hard to step away from all these years, even making still lifes, and having full control. I like to kind of embrace this, I don't know, kind of like high energy, a bit of a mishmash and kind of like a chaotic vibe of thoughts and things being thrown around, because I feel like in the end it kind of comes through in the work that way. But this image is all of the balloon animals displayed on a table. It's called Balloon Landscape, and it is the NFT that is being auctioned off by you guys. I just wanted to show this here because, yeah, I think that, I don't know if the winner will be announced tomorrow or what, but this is the one.
Yeah, it'll be tomorrow.
Cool. So now you know the story. But yeah, another idea I had for the book was, what if I went around to different playgrounds in the area, and I brought an assistant with me, and we hung like different pieces of fabric, colored fabric that I had behind playground equipment, sort of just to separate it from its environment. And also going back to this idea of, was it made in the studio? Was it found? I kind of liked this hybrid approach where I was like, well, what if I bring the studio to it? Like, I brought some small speed lights and lit it, and also like the background, the normal background's kind of removed, so it's difficult to imagine if it was shot outside or inside. Another thing I did was a casting call of portraits. I was just interested in all these mini projects, kind of being there together and saying different things, but also kind of saying the same thing, and embracing just this idea of like a variety show, and the feeling like one has walking through a theme park or something chaotic like that. So, you know, using a similar lens and lighting and color palette, but embracing different photographic genres. Yeah, so I did this casting call of portraits, and these are some of the people who responded, and they came through my studio. And yeah, some of the backdrops are fabric, some of them are printed backdrops, kind of calling back to the Balloon Animal series and the other Playground series. And I would kind of pick for some people these moments that seemed neither here nor there, kind of in between a smile and a frown, or maybe they're blinking, or maybe they're looking not at the camera, or whatever it may be. Like she's like kind of like mid pulling her hair. And I just liked this idea of like choosing the wrong one. It seemed to fit the theme of the book more. Here are a few more. She's like in mid speech. I thought it was funny. And Nick on the left is upside down. I like that you can see the Adorama bag, this kind of cheap light stand, and just kind of showing the seams a bit. And yeah, and then also throughout the book are just still lifes that don't really belong to any of those series, but I was just making in the background the whole time. Just this nature of experimentation that is always kind of going on in my studio. And yeah, this image on the right, it's one of my favorites, but I don't know what the hell is going on. And I really love it. I tried to redraw this like rabbit patch that I got at the dollar store, and in the bottom right there, and then redraw this gold droplet in kind of just a crude way. And there's like sunglasses that I bought that were broken on top of this stock image of like a gold droplet falling into a gold puddle. The image on the left is a canister of whipped cream mixed with a paint roller without the roller on it, and an image from like a vintage, or like a spread from like a vintage copy of Time magazine I got at a thrift store, and a dusty inside container of mints. Just like, I'm interested in this idea of it being so hyper specific what is being chosen to be put in the image, that it is seemingly random, but really it's like I'm composing, and it feels to me more like a song, and it feels to me like throwing rhyme and reason out the window a bit, and solely focusing on a gut feeling, or what your heart says, it has been kind of like very beneficial to my practice in a lot of ways, and allows me to almost communicate in what feels like a different language, to try things out and not be afraid that that because they're not easily digestible, or because they're not straightforward in their communication, because they aren't those things doesn't mean that they're failures or that they fall flat. But I like embracing this idea of perplexity in a way. This is a collage that's in the book. It's like a waterfall, long exposure waterfall river image from a calendar that has been cut up in kind of abstract shapes, and laid on top of this faux snakeskin fabric that I had. And I really like this one. I feel like it's like very beautiful. And that's also one thing I don't want, or my goal is, to make people scratch their heads and kind of like look at images longer, but not everything is haha funny. I do want there to be these moments of kind of beauty and awe, and also just kind of like appreciating how things look when they're photographed. Sometimes it's as simple as it being in the perfect light, and something mundane can kind of be transformed, and sometimes it is like more complicated than that. This is one of those printed backdrops of the sky, but I liked using it as kind of more of a material and less as like a flat object, almost like a magic carpet or something like this, using like a print as something with form instead of 2D. And then on top I laid soundproofing material. I'm a musician as well, and we have like a back room, and the studio I share with my friend Pat, and yeah, there was just like leftover stuff like this, and I was like, clouds are fluffy, this stuff is fluffy. Sometimes the analogy is a bit obvious, but I was, again, in the nature of just seeing what works, and throwing things together to see what feels right. But yeah, eventually this work was compiled in a book called Amusement Park. my friend Braulio Amato, who's an amazing designer and artist, illustrated the cover. It's similar to Infinite Power. This one comes in a kind of sturdier plastic cover that is screen printed red, and then behind it is like an open seam book. I actually have it here. The binding is like exposed. I don't know if you can see underneath. It kind of like shows all the lines of the pages, which is cool, and then it's screen printed over top of that. I'll show some images on this PDF, but then I can maybe flip through the book itself so you guys can see, like, kind of get a feel for it. But yeah, it was so fun to lay out just because the images are so kind of interchangeable in a way. And I really like this idea of like not having to tell a narrative, but having the free reign to move things around and see what the conversation is like when you put one image next to another. And that's always been huge for me. I feel like photography is all kind of about context in a way. And yeah, I loved kind of working on these pairings. My friend Brian Paul Lamont designed it. He's really good. Sometimes there's moments like this with images overlapping or multiple images on a page. This one on the left is part of the drop. Not all of the images in the book made it into the drop, but a lot of them did. And yeah, here you can see two images I shared before kind of paired up, just thinking about color and composition and form here. And I feel like miraculously they look like really good together, but it was never, again, in creating, I feel like I'm very in the moment and not really thinking about how the song will kind of be arranged in the end. But I just trust the process, and there's always kind of like happy moments like this where things seem to really align. It's kind of an alternate view of the book. Image on the left shot at an actual amusement park. Image on the right is like a collage I made when my printer was running out of ink, and I thought it would be kind of amazing to try to take advantage of that. I always love like you know, it's kind of beautiful like when the print comes out wrong and has these lines, unless you like really need it for something and you're like, fuck, what's going on. But yeah, I loved what it was doing, and I was like, oh, this would be great material for a photograph. And I try to keep an open mind like that, like, I don't know, use things that would maybe be considered wrong or kind of like throwaway, but trying to give them a new life here. That is the end of my image presentation, but I'm still down to talk for a while, and I can kind of also flip through this if you guys want to see. This is the first page. It's like kind of welcome to the amusement park.
You can stop the share screen so we can see.
Oh my God, sorry, man. It's like, yeah, bright white screen. Here we go. Cool. Yeah, here's a book. This is the opening page. And then goes into, it's like a water slide and a strange slinky photo I made in my bedroom. And then the third page is this balloon landscape that one of you lucky people will receive. Goes on to this. This is one of my favorite spreads. Both of these are available as NFTs. But it kind of has this first part, and then it's like an intro. We thought it'd be funny to put the title page like later on and kind of like start the book after that. And there's a lot of different paper stocks. I don't know if you can see, but this one's kind of like glossy and has some tooth to it. But most of the stuff is kind of matte. In the middle of the book, there's a whole section of the playground photos. Let me see. That is printed with like a different ink setup. It's printed like very kind of crazily with these like neon inks, and it's like a 4-color process, and it's on like hyper glossy paper. in the middle of the book. I just love this idea of like throwing people a curveball as they continue to kind of look through the book. Like there's surprises, or I also like this idea as if it was a magazine and that was like an ad in the middle for nothing. So yeah, just kind of like playing around. It's a very playful book. Here's that image I showed before as like a full bleed spread. I like this one a lot. This is an NFT too that will drop tomorrow. It's like a basketball cutout from Party City, like an ornament for a kid's birthday party. And I love that, you know, it's very flat in real life, but hung here, it's kind of misleading. It looks like maybe a vector image or maybe a real basketball. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. My friend Yoma wrote like a poem that's also in the book. And yeah, the last image is this, also available as an NFT. It's like a picture of a strange empty room I just found on Google image search and printed it out and then taped it to the side of an Apple box. And I like this kind of surreal pairing where maybe at first glance you think it's like a portal, but then you kind of understand what's going on. And then there's no real thank yous, but here printed on the last page, it says, most of this work was made in a room with no windows. Thank you to the sun. Whoops. And I like this idea too, that the photos are so brightly lit and kind of colorful and have a lot of energy, but my studio is in like a basement in Greenpoint, and it's decently spacious, which is why I took it. But I was like, you know, I sort of light everything artificially anyway when I'm in there, so shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, it's also kind of this I feel like it goes with the book somehow because everything looks so sunny, but it ends up being kind of false. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Have I spoken for a good amount of time to take questions?
That was
Okay,
perfect. We can
cool.
work if anyone has anything to add. We've been making these like conversations around the work and around different themes at the end of these lectures. That so if anyone wants to add something, just go ahead. I will start by saying that it's really interesting. I like a lot the book. I haven't seen the book before, and it really shows this way you have of, you know, the idea of playing is all around the work and the book itself. Right. Just the simple gesture of putting this like if it was spray painted on top of the
Right.
It is like if you go to an abandoned amusement park and you start rethinking about everything that means to be in an amusement park and the reality of it, like you said, years later. So that idea is everywhere, and it's amazing how it shows. Because I am of the idea that the way the work feels is as important or more important than what it depicts. So, for example, when I think of, I always told my students that this book, The Catcher in the Rye, for example, one is when you read a novel, you're thinking about what the writer says sometimes, but a book like The Catcher in the Rye, it's also about how it's written in a way that it shows how the main character feels. So he's not always right. He is wrong most of the time. Almost everything he thinks it's kind of wrong in a way, you know. So us being confronted with that wrongness and that sense of discovery of the character is as important as the things that are said in the book. And I also think, for example, of music and bands like Weezer, for example, that feel like being in a garage. It's not particularly great music, but it really feels like being in a garage, and that's more important than that's very important for what you're listening. And I see that a lot in your work. How do you approach this idea? What do you think of this idea of just playing? How does that become a form of communication and not just a form of expressing yourself?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
um, I think people are sometimes afraid to show, like, you know, when you close your eyes sometimes in bed, what you see is so completely insane, and it's not like logical. Like, it's not, even just looking at my desk, it's like none of this stuff goes together, but it's here, and I've almost made it by accident. So I like this idea of kind of embracing that, because I think people can actually relate to that. And I think sometimes people are afraid, they kind of edit themselves too much to try to communicate perfectly, right? Instead of embracing the mess. And I think that actually it's very relatable to show this stuff and have people confronted with it and realize that you know, our realities are complex, and our brains are complex, and we have playful thoughts too, right? And we have strange thoughts, and we all of these things. And I think it's very human in a way. I think people can relate to playing and experimenting, and not having things be so perfect, and not having to spoon feed people like very you know, kind of dialed in information. So I embrace play and photograph it and use it as a form of communication, because I think that, like I said, it's just like it's very human, and it's easy to relate to. I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. And I, the this thing that you were saying, that sometimes I think too that people are afraid to just embrace that the world is a mess, you know, or not the world in a like big way, but just being alive is a mess. You're confused most
Right.
of the time, and everything's confusing. Most of the things you see or interact with are not product of what you are with, what you want, you know. It's just that some other people want and are there, and you're confronted with them. And I was thinking earlier too that, you know, reality is something that we're confronted to, and we have to figure out in every single moment of our lives, and it's hard.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Good question though. I saw Laurent turn his camera on.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
What's
There
up,
he is.
man? Good to hear you
What's
talk.
going on? Yeah, thanks, man. Good to see you.
You too. I had a question for you, kind of in line with that thought of play and stuff. And even the way you were talking about the balloon animals, and she was kind of handing them to you when you're setting up these backdrops,
Yeah.
is very much seems like it's kind of like a flow situation.
Hmm.
But I'm wondering, how are you kind of editing visually as you're creating, or are you kind of like tweak something, shoot, and then kind of like coming to it on the back end and saying, okay, now what do I have? But I'm wondering like where you're placing those like points of edit in
Right.
your head and creation.
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I shooting digitally kind of like allows you to see what you're getting, obviously. Um, and so you can kind of edit in real time if something's not working, but I try to, I don't like to do too much afterwards. So I really try to nail it in the moment. In the case of it, you know, experimenting like that and kind of going with the flow with the balloon animals, it's just about trying to cover bases, different angles, et cetera, et cetera. But when I'm looking at the work later, I feel like, you know, I like the idea that, okay, this is what I got. One of these, it's just gonna have to have potential somehow. You know what I mean? And and so I think a lot of it also does come together for me when I'm kind of on the computer later, looking at everything and kind of shifting things around and seeing what works that way. Um, and I'd say maybe that's where, weirdly, that's where a lot of the control comes in, because as you said, if I'm just kind of flowing in the moment, um, I feel like there's one side of my brain that's turned on, but it might not be the one that knows how to make these kinds of big edits, or kind of it's maybe not the one that knows how to I don't know, best present the work later on, or whatever it may be. But yeah. Sorry, long answer. Hopefully that's all right.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I feel like some people may see these and think they're like fun, and but somehow think they're easy to get the forms to look
Right.
interesting. And it's like it's really not easy if you were to give somebody the same collection of materials. Like they're not going to
Totally.
be able to get the same sort of like whimsical and fun, but also like form based photos out of it. So I was wondering how
Totally.
that pairing would be because it's really dope the way you actually execute it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Also, I think a lot of it has to do with light. I feel like people underestimate the power of lighting and how it can say like totally different things. In the Twitter space the other day, everybody was talking about that on-camera flash, the Stephen Shore photo of the like at the diner of the pancakes. Um, and how, you know, if that was like, there's this famous Eggleston photo. It's like on an airplane. It's like a glass. I think maybe someone's fingers in it or something, and it's like the light coming through the window is so beautiful. It's like painterly in a way. You know, if Stephen Shore had used the same light on those pancakes, it's like a totally different vibe. On camera flash, just like it adds a certain, you're viewing it then through like a different I don't know. He's kind of putting a personality onto it already. And I think what I'm doing also in the case of these balloon animal photos and a lot of things shot in my studio is like I'm using kind of hard light. That's kind of, you know, like a big hard light up here shot diagonally that kind of mimics like the sun in a way. And I think it's good at making things look 3D and bright and kind of friendly. Um, and adding this kind of you know, something that people are familiar with seeing, right? But then you look deeper and you realize that it's actually kind of confusing. I feel like if I was just blasting everything with on-camera flash, um, I don't know, the work would just like look completely different. And yeah, so I try to dial in the lighting in like a really nice way because I think that it adds something to the convo, and also then if I do make a mess or I am shooting something weird, at least like one thing is kind of digestible, the lighting, you know, and it's kind of like, oh, that looks nice, but what's going on? So that's something I think about too.
The idea of what's going on, the idea of uh, I think something that is in all the through all the work is the idea of how should I feel by seeing this, and with the portraits I get a lot like they are at the same time that I am going through this amusement park in a way and seeing these people and seeing what are they doing here, or why are they being like that. I think they too are feeling something like
Right.
how do I feel by being here? What am I doing here? Like if they were kind of faking the emotion, you know, the joy of being
Right.
something
Yeah,
that,
totally.
yeah, something that I think is really interesting in this work, for example, is that um, there's always this struggle to make sense of the work. Every image you see, there's one struggles to make sense formally and also conceptually, but it becomes digestible in a way. It becomes digestible when it starts accumulating things and for example the in the book I found it really interesting how the experience also changes completely just by little things like putting this photograph in this corner and the other one a little bit on top. It's like you're playing also with the images and everything. Not it doesn't even make sense in a way, you know. It doesn't have a strict sense. So I think it becomes digestible while it starts accumulating things on top of things on top of things on top of things. That is also the sentiment of each image.
Right. Yeah, it almost becomes that sort of becomes what the takeaway is. You're kind of like, all right, this is just kind of like a bombardment of, you know, insanity. And maybe that's what it is about or something. But yeah, thanks for saying that. I tried to kind of emulate what the images feel like in the layout process as well. So everything is kind of tied up nicely. And also what you said before about like the sort of spray paint looking text on the cover. I thought it's like just this idea of a kind of like defacing your own book is kind of funny or something.
Yeah. And it's totally like what you said at the beginning. It's totally like going to an amusement park as a grown-up years later of remembering having fun in this place, but you go again and it's a completely different thing. Maybe you have fun, but you have fun by thinking about how can this be fun, you know, in a
right
way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you realize how ridiculous it is, and your head is kind of full of all these sort of sarcastic jabs at what's going on. It's a different kind of fun. But yeah, any other questions from the audience? Someone has their hand up. Jimmy Limit.
Yeah.
Jimbo,
Hi,
what's
can you
up,
see
man?
me?
Yeah,
Hi.
yeah.
How's it going? I'm just making dinner. I'm just turning my camera on for a minute here.
Beard's looking nice, man.
I know. I can't do anything about it until it gets a bit warmer. I'm wondering, you mentioned editing the book down a little bit, and I'm just wondering what that process was, because when you revisit older work, maybe you haven't thought about it for a while. I'm talking personally now.
Yeah.
I'm going through a collection now, and I'm just kind of see like which photos do I still actually like from this, because, you know, you've maybe moved on a little bit from that body of work.
Definitely.
And I'm just wondering how many you actually still really like, and
No, I'm just kidding. No, I still like the work. Yeah, I mean, I think I was also thinking about what would people want to own as like a single image, digital image in the NFT space, which is like a completely different thought process than how will this image look next to this image in the book, and what if I put this on top of this in the book? It's like a totally different arena to present the work in. So I was thinking about, and I've been kind of critical of myself before as someone who I feel like I don't really make these like kind of like banger images. I feel like my images exist next to my other images well, you know, and they kind of create a world and tell a strange story that way. But so it's actually kind of difficult to be like, which of these will be cool and what might someone want to buy as just a single image? What is graphic enough? What is, you know, yeah, what do I still like? That, I mean, that's a good question. For sure, I look at any of my old projects and it's like not half of it is hidden anymore. But this one I was surprised. It was fun to revisit. I was like, man, I was even crazier back then than I am now. I feel like as an artist, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, as you go on in your career, it's almost like you kind of refine yourself and your style, and things get a bit more subdued. And you know, in a way that can be good, but in a way my head's always searching for this thing where it's like, how do I get back to that kind of crazy, kind of a bit naive place where I was just allowing myself to fully run free like this. So it was actually refreshing to see some of the stuff. Some of it I'm, you know, I'm whatever about, but that stuff didn't make it into the NFT edit. But yeah, it's difficult. Anyway, good luck with your collection, Jimmy. I'm excited to see what makes it. That stuff's so good. The Uline stuff. Any other questions?
Just to comment on the idea of context, that I think it's something that will be struggling a lot in the NFT space.
Totally.
Yeah, because you know, I think photography like took the path of the series of photographs, because a single image always needs context. You know, in the stages they try to fill that context with text and with explanations of things and with captions, etc. But as it became a more sophisticated form of art, the only way to give a context that made sense to the image was to create the context with more images, you know.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, luckily, I think they look good in that grid on the foundation page. So there's context when you view them as a whole, but yeah, just thinking about, you know, unless someone wants to buy a few of these and look at them next to each other, it's different than flipping through a book for sure.
Yeah, and that's something that happens. Some collectors, most collectors that are or that identify themselves as just collectors, you know, they generally buy 3-4 photographs of each project because and
Right.
it's something that I find really interesting because most of them are not yet are not from the traditional photo world, you know. So they are trying to figure out what makes sense for them in the NFT space, and they are intuitively going to through the series because if this one catches the attention, maybe this one makes a connection that asks for another third photograph that can complete that connection, and it's really interesting to see how this is developing in this space. But yeah, I also think that the grid is like I see it like a container, you know, that then you go and submerge in one, but then you go out again. All of that.
Yeah, totally. Definitely.